tradition, and I was told by a few white people how backwards and savage.
If you didn't get a chance to watch the rest of the creator's video, go back and watch the whole thing. Today we're going to talk about cultural appropriation in the spiritual community. So buckle your seatbelts, we're about to piss some people off. There seems to be this recurring theme anytime a BIPOC person brings up cultural appropriation within the spiritual community, where some of our palm-colored companions and compatriots talk about how gatekeeping is wrong and like gatekeeping spirituality is terrible and everybody should have access to all the spiritualities that there are so that they can figure out the path that's best for them. And you know, when you're coming from a position of privilege, that is a very easy thing to say. The problem is that it ignores centuries of palm-colored people trying to erase the cultural and spiritual identities of BIPOC and Indigenous people. It ignores the fact that Indigenous people's religion and spiritual practices was literally against the law in America and in Canada for a really long time. It ignores the fact that they had their children taken away from them to be indoctrinated into Christianity so that they could be acceptable to live among the white man. It also kind of glosses over the fact that some of these spiritual practices, such as hoodoo, were literally created as a defense against their palm-colored ancestors. Throughout our lifetime, we've seen how these practices have been demonized and disrespected by the media while being monetized for profit. And if you watch the original video, this woman talks about how when she was talking about some of her spiritual practices that are directly related to her culture, she got backlash from people telling her how it was gross and inappropriate and savage. And I'm not even going to take the time out to address saying that something that an Indigenous person is doing is savage, because you already fucking know. And so what ends up happening within the spiritual community is that you have white people who are unwilling to say that anything is cultural appropriation, but are willing to demonize bits and pieces of spiritualities from BIPOC communities by saying what is and is not acceptable. And I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like colonization to me. So you can't claim that something is not cultural appropriation while also trying to colonize that spirituality, which is exactly what you're doing when you're saying that some parts of it are acceptable and others are not. And because as a white person, you have the ability to pick and choose what is and is not acceptable and have within spirituality for like the last God knows how fucking long, that is the reason why it is okay for BIPOC people to tell you that certain stuff ain't for you. And to provide a caveat, because I already know I'm going to get this, none of this means that if a BIPOC person introduces you to aspects of their spirituality and invites you to practice, that you are not allowed to practice it. You very much can. At that point, you've been invited to sit at the table. But what that does mean is that it is not okay for you to monetize that spiritual practice, nor is it okay for you to start indoctrinating other people into that practice. Again, you are a guest here.